everyone, Tom here. Tonight we're going to talk about how to rig your Saddle Tramp swim baits. Been getting a lot of questions, how to rig them, how to weight them, how to fish them. We won't get into how to fish them so much tonight, a little bit toward the end, but we'll really dive into the weeds here on rigging and weighting and all the technical jazz that I've been getting asked about. I've never done one of these before. I feel a little crazy standing here alone talking to a camera, but we're going to try to get this done. Hang tight. It's going to be a lot of info. Going to try to keep the pace quick. Get this all covered. Let's dive into it. In front of me, on my left, I have the 8-inch. On my right, the 6-inch. Different rig for each of them. You're going to use the small rig on the 6-inch, the medium rig on the 8-inch. Otherwise, the process is the exact same for each, as far as the steps to rigging it. So before we get into rigging it, though, I'm going to show you guys some leaders. For the 6-inch and the 8-inch, I like a Surflon leader. Some guys like fluoro. I'm not really one of them. I prefer Surflon. I definitely prefer fluoro or Surflon over a stiff wire leader, especially on the 6-inch. The 8-inch isn't so touchy. The 6-inch, being that it's smaller, is definitely going to be a lot more touchy. You're going to want to go with a Surflon leader in the area. I like 30 pound. Remember, it's not a Poseidon. It's not a big giant musky bait. This is a bass bait that is a little pikey, and you can catch musky on it. I'm not fishing it on a Tranx 500 and an extra heavy rod. I'm fishing it on a smaller bait caster, you know, your heavier bass setup. And that 30 pound, 25 pound Surflon is right in the money for it. It allows it to swim really nicely. It doesn't interfere with the action. It's perfect. Stepping up to the 8, same deal. I like Surflon, but I'm now in like the 90 pound area. It's not as touchy as the 6-inch. Fluoro guys, you can get away with your heavier musky leaders, your 130 pound. I still probably wouldn't go with a stiff wire leader, like a piano wire glide bait kind of leader. It's just going to deaden it. It's just not worth it. Your Surflon or your fluoro is going to be your best bet there. Now with leaders out of the way, all we really need, like I said, to rig a bait is your bait and a harness. And for the 8-inch, we're going with the medium harness meant for the 8-inch. And starting off, you take your harness and you'll notice it's kind of a screw around a pin. And that pin is going to act as our guide. So we take our pin, the center of that screw, find the center of the bait as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, but best you can. In the first few turns of that, we're going to really guide it and push it hard to get it started. Then we can ease off a little bit. But those first few turns are really important to making sure that that's going where it needs to go. If not, you're going to see it bulging out on one side. The bait's going to start looking a little deformed and funky. You can kind of see on this side it's looking a little weird. Keep going and see what happens if I can get it to do it. Now this one's looking fairly good. You'll really know if you start to hear some funky stuff going on behind the eyeballs, some crackling and crunching. That means you're poking the eyes out. That means you're definitely not centered. So the last few turns, definitely on the 8, not so much the 6, being that it's saltwater plastic, it's stiff and harder. So I use pliers to finish it off. It gets kind of tough to turn once it's really in there. And at this point, my screw's in, right? And now I have to make a decision. Which way am I going to fish this? Meaning, am I going to fish it traditional, like you see a swim bait with the paddle facing down, or how I like it, spin it around and fish it with that paddle up and the point down? It's different than what you're used to seeing probably, but I prefer that. I think it has a little weirder of a walk, or a wag, a little wider wag. And maybe most importantly, if you're familiar with a Senko, this falls exactly like a Senko when you rig it this way. It's going to fall horizontally through the water like that versus diving nose down. I think that's awesome, especially on the retrieves that I like. A real erratic burst with a pause. On that pause, it's going to shoot off and kind of hover there before falling horizontally. It looks deadly. So I'm picking this way. And why I say pick which way you're going, so you see my ring here. My hook's going to sit along the belly, and when I do so, I'll do that again, I'm trapping my solid ring to the nose of the bait. I can't gain access to that anymore to hook my leader onto it. So that means I gotta go half turn either direction. I'm gonna go a half turn out of the bait because I'm pretty far into it. Once there, go back to the belly, or in this case, I guess I'm upside down, so the back, which is gonna be my belly. Now my ring's free, see? I can attach it to my swivel or my snap, or in my case, I like to use a split ring and eliminate the snap. But anyway, you can attach it now, and that's going to give it the most action. It can freely wiggle now, and life's good. So this is where things get a little tricky. We've got to measure up where our hook's going to sit. And we want that rigging tight, but not too tight, and definitely not loose. I've had pictures sent to me where the rigging's kind of dangling around down here and jingling. We don't want that. And we also don't want, if I get too tight, you'll notice that head kind of pulls itself down. We don't want that either. We want a happy medium, nice and taut, just like that. And now, I got this on the first try, but how I'll do this, I'll spin my hook around, and see here how the split ring's sitting up. It's not really laying flat against the bait. Don't want that. Spin it again, it's laying nice and flat. Perfect. That's how we want it. So that tells us we're going to use this point. That one's going in the bait, right? Now, to get it in the bait, I'll tend to flip it upside down like that. Get a good mark of where that hook's going to lay. Remember, tight, but not too tight. So it looks like our hook would come in right about there. Now I take my point, kind of make a little mark there, a little scar on it to tell me where that hook's going to go. You kind of see there. Go in there, and I don't like to go too far in. I like to kind of leave those hooks sticking out. I think they get a better reach if you don't bury them. Make sure everything's nice and straight and in line. See how here it's dangling a little bit? It tells me I could go a little tighter. So let's back this up just a little bit behind our other mark. Now here, notice rig isn't moving as much. It's way better there. Hook isn't totally buried. It's got some nice reach sticking out from the bait. It's not obstructed. Laying nice and flat. So we have a good rig. You know, our ring's nice and dangling free. It's going to really allow that bait to rock back and forth on the retrieve. Lastly, all I'll do once that's rigged up is these baits that are freshly poured with this stiff plastic, not so much the 6s, although you can, I'll stretch the tails a little bit. You've seen people do this on Medusas and Bulldogs and stuff, but kind of massage it out. Don't rip the tail off. I mean, you can pull pretty hard. They're not going to rip off. Don't pull on the paddle, just pull on the meat of the tail and kind of break those bonds of the plastic. Just helps a lot. I'm using a hard plastic, hoping to get a little more life out of them for you guys. So just one little thing you can do before weighting them to bring them to life a little more. Now moving on to what I've had the most questions about by far is weighting. How to put them in, how to take them out, where to put them, how many of them to use, when to use them, which ones. The list goes on. So I'll try to cover it all here. For the 8-inch specifically, I'm using my bigger weights, the 1/8 ounces on the website. And the biggest thing with weighting these, or at least the biggest mistake I see, is guys putting them in vertically like this, like think of jail bars up and down, or they're going in at an angle all willy-nilly, not really any real direction to it. Neither of those is how I think it's right. All you're doing there is you're adding weight to the bait. You know, it's not helping the action of the bait, it's just putting weight in the bait. To do it best, I like to imagine a lateral line down the bait and keep that weight below the lateral line. So when I put these weights in, I want them to be rather parallel to the belly and below that lateral line, almost making like a bulge in the belly. You'll see here in a minute when I do it. Take my first weight. Again, I'm working upside down just so I can see the bait and show you guys. I'm going to lay it on here. I don't want to jam it up in here to where it's banging off that hook. I want it behind there. So somewhere in there, if I notice, here's the end of the weight. So I want to be putting it in beyond that. Like I said, I don't want to crash into the hook when this goes in. So I'm going to start it in, and then I'm going to kind of squeeze the belly out a little bit, making sure I started in on that seam right in the middle of the bait, and squeeze the belly. That's going to allow me to go down parallel in that belly without going too high up in that bait. We want to keep all that weight in the belly and keep it upright, or, you know, downright, however, which way you're fishing it. So my weight's in there. I'll give it a little squeeze to really get it up in there. See how it makes kind of a bulge? If I'm looking at it, that's all right. It's got a full belly. And that means it's going to run the best, you know. On your herky-jerky retrieve on the pauses, it's not going to helicopter over and roll around on you. It's going to stay upright. It's going to keep that hook down where it's supposed to be. Keep it natural, lifelike, you know. Sometimes I'll take another one, and same deal. I'll start it right up in front of this hook, being careful not to go in the same hole as the hook. But same deal. Give it a little squeeze, parallel in there. See how I'm kind of making a bulge with it? Give him a pinch, fix my hook, and now he's up in there. See that? That's a perfectly weighted bait and perfectly rigged bait in my opinion. I got my point down, my weight's very low in the bait, rigging's nice and tight, and my ring's free. And also I stretched out my tail, help that kick around a little more on a slower retrieve. We'll get to retrieve here in a minute, but we still got some more to go through. Question I've had asked, or can I fish it on swim bait hooks and jig heads? Swim bait hooks, your typical EWG or like your underspin bass hook, the 6-inch, you can, but it's not ideal, I'll say that. You're better off with the jig head. I love fishing them on jig heads. I got one rigged up here. I like a 4 or 5/0 hook. These are the Kalin's 3/8 ounce. Weight doesn't matter. Weight's up to you, wherever you want to put it. It's going to kind of open other doors for you than the external harness. You know, you're going to be able to get down a little deeper, work it a little differently with this. It's going to have the nose down fall, similar to how it would if you rigged it traditional, paddle down, point up. Here I have the 3/8 ounce, at least that's what's on here. These also fit the Strike King Squadron. These are 3/4. I've used the 1 ouncers. I've used their 1/8 ouncers actually. They all work. Basically what you're looking for is just a skinny, narrow jig head, similar to the bait. The bait's not a fat bait. It's not round like a Kitech, or, you know, it's skinny. So you want a similarly skinny jig head. And how I do that, I just take the bait. You'll see here, I just kind of snip off the nose to whatever, however fat or however tall your jig head is. And something important I'll do here is when I go in, I'm not going in, if you can see there, right in the middle of the bait. I'm kind of cheating toward the back. Reason being is when I come out here, like you saw before, if I can do that, I have more gap, right? If I come down the middle of the bait, I might lose a centimeter or so of that gap, and suddenly that hook's buried closer to the bait. So in any scenario, cheat that hook out a little more, in my opinion, unless you're in a weird situation where you don't want to do so. That's how I rig them on a jig head. And like I said, I love fishing them on a jig head. We fished them on the Niagara River on jig heads, and they work great in swift current, deep water. It's somewhere where I really wouldn't reach for an external harness. And that's the beauty of these guys. That's kind of why I did them the way I do them. I had a lot of people telling me, oh, you should make internal harnesses and do them this way, do them that way. And maybe I will one day, but for now, I want you guys to like play with them, kind of like I do. I have all these accessories here. I mean, buzz blades. You have your spinnerbait attachment for the head. I caught my big one on double 10 blades, like a bucktail attachment out front of it. It really depends on where you're fishing it and where you want to put that bait. You can put it anywhere. Take the weights out, like I have this one rigged up already. It's weightless. Fish that over 6-inch deep water with weeds. I mean, fast burning it, it's fine. You add some weights to it, suddenly you can get it down a little bit. Put it on a jig head, you're getting down even further. Or, I mean, here I think this is a 3-ounce spinnerbait head, and you want to talk about getting down. I mean, now we're dredging bottom in 20 feet of water. I wanted to take people kind of back to the basics, you know. We're so used to lures now, you get them out of the box and that's how they are. I mean, you can put some weight, put a weight in them, whatever, get them down a little deeper, but you can't play with them and change them up a whole lot outside of how they're meant to be fished, you know. And I wanted to keep this really open-ended. I wanted to, like I said, be able to fish it in 6 inches of water or turn around and fish it in 25 feet of water by just tweaking a few things in it. A couple little tips I'll leave you guys with before we really quick hit on some very basic stuff about fishing it. I had someone ask how to get the nail weights out. Go in the same hole that you put them in. I take my pliers, my needle noses. I'll kind of give it a pinch, work it out to the surface till I can see lead. Don't use your teeth, because I almost hooked myself in the face using my teeth. I use pliers now, but right out like that. Can go right back in the hole. If I want to go back in, I kind of give it a pinch. I see the hole I made before. I already have a cavity kind of drilled out from it, and bang, it's even easier that time. That's about it. Another, well, not question, something I ran into personally is if you're driving around spot to spot, it's fine to leave them hooked up like this. You can leave your hook in the head. Coming soon, I'm working on something where you might not have to put the hook in the head. Little teaser. But if you're driving around in the car, in the truck, whatever, doing 60 mile an hour down the interstate, take your hook out, okay? Because with that hook in there, you got this hooked on the rod, that bait's kicking around in the truck, on top of the car, in the rack, roof rack, whatever. That hook wants to rip out of there because it's violently thrashing in the wind. Underwater, I mean, you can fish this thing, you could troll it all day, it's not going to rip out. But when you're talking on a roof rack going down the interstate, and I say this because I learned from personal experience, it will eventually rip a little bit. And I'd rather have fish rip it than driving. So, like I said, just pop it out, hook it up. You don't have to take it off the corkscrew, you can, but oftentimes, once I get them on there nice, I'll just leave the corkscrew in and they go in my box just like that. Storage, I don't know if I can fit it on camera here. Just a little bin. That's the beauty in these guys. You don't, these are my sixers. I take all the scrap ones that you don't get, ones with imperfections, but they're not like a bait with a bunch of trebles, fixed harnesses. You can take these off the corkscrews and just throw them in a bin and have, a couple dozen baits and a couple harnesses, and that's really all you need. When I was starting to test these, I was, I guess, understandably skeptical because it was something I made. I'm like, is this even going to catch anything? I got to take other stuff with me, right? But I'm at the point now where I have confidence in them, so it's like all I take with me, and I genuinely mean that. I want to learn to fish them. I want to give you guys the best advice, so to do that, it's all I really take now. Granted, I haven't gone a whole lot this year, been busy, but it really is a confidence bait for me, and it's all I take, and when I do it, I just take a little bin of rubber, and got it over here, a little box like this with my rigs and my weights and stuff. Really slims down, what I'm taking, frees up some boat space. It's nice. This is nothing new. This is just kind of my take on an existing idea. It's not a revolutionary bait. It's not a game-changing bait, but I can promise you it's a bait that works. I wouldn't be here right now if it didn't pass that test in my book, and it did. So with that said, eventually here I would like to make a little video showing you guys exactly how I fish it and talking about it. But I will leave you with a couple little tips, hopefully get you started, and a couple clips of the retrieves that I like to do with it. Tip number one, and probably the most important tip, is go fast. A lot of people send me videos of the bait in the water and they're like, oh, I like the way this looks, and they're dragging it along the bank. And like I said before, I didn't really make this to be a slow rolling bait. I made this to be an erratic bait. Yep, pause, and then it shoots off. Not just wobble, 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 wobble. That's your traditional swim bait. I made this to be more like a Mr. Wiggly, if you're familiar, or a banjo minnow, going even further back. And to do that, it's fast and erratic. A lot of us are using these high-speed bait casters, Tranks 400 Lexos, these pissy fun reels with like 40 inches of pickup per turn, 30 inches of pickup even on the slow end. A couple bursts to that reel handle, that's going to get you a nice little jolt in the water. And that's how a fish swims. Fish swimming through the water isn't swimming robotically non-stop. It's swimming in a burst, stopping, looking around, swimming in a burst, and that's what I'm trying to replicate when fishing these. You're going to get the best action that way. You can kind of let the bait tell you how fast to go. Experiment with that. Pull it along the boat, pull it along the bank, and when you really see that tail thumping, that's your speed right there. Other than the retrieve there, don't be afraid to impart long pauses, especially if you're rigging them up how I like them rigged. Like I said, point down, paddle up. That's going to have a really nice hang, and it's going to fall really slow horizontally. Don't be afraid to really put pauses into that. Other than that, the biggest thing are your nail weights, guys. Like I said, keep those below the lateral line, whichever way you choose to fish it. And please, like I said, mix it up. It's not, I see a lot of people sending me pictures of it rigged this way, which is fine, but that's not law. Flip it over. I've actually started experimenting rigging it on its side, kind of like this, If I'm looking down the bait like that, it requires that you twist everything 45 degrees and hook goes in here and we weight it differently, but that's the beauty in this. I really want it to be flexible to do whatever you want to do. So with that said, here are a couple clips of the retrieve I like to use with it and kind of how it looks next to the boat.
cannot believe something. That looks so good.
Good one. Really good. Really.
Other than that, thank you guys so much for all the orders and all the support and all the feedback and the advice, good and bad, and just like everything. It's been a blast. This is a childhood dream come true. I'm loving filling these orders. Keep them coming. Got a sale coming Labor Day weekend, 20% off everything. Some new colors, some of them here, sitting on this side over here. Some revised things to the 8-inch baits, revised harnesses. Your nail weights now come in 5 packs, a little cheaper. Just things always changing, and it's thanks to you guys offering advice and being honest with me. And I hope you keep doing that. And I hope you like the baits and start catching some fish on them. Send me pictures, send me videos. I look forward to it, guys. Good luck out there. Till next time.